Good morning, folks. I hope you're well on this past 8 in the morning, but there is a lot for me to go through. So hopefully the kind of change in light to the side will not kind of interrupt this video, but then hopefully I could get through this as quick as possible and get it out so you guys know what's happening. And what is happening? Well, exactly. Yesterday the FSA released a statement, and basically it was suggesting that we need to consider a 10 milligram per day RDA of CBD. Yes, 10 milligrams. Not great. But it's an advisory, right? So even though it's gone out and the consumer knows, you guys don't have to change your products at the moment, because certainly there is a mention of maintaining the integrity of the list. If you guys all of a sudden started changing labels and whatnot, well, basically you'd be creating new products, and then obviously you wouldn't be allowed on the list. So hold your horses. Don't do anything until the FSA kind of say anything. As for people who are in supermarkets, I don't know how this is going to affect you guys. I suspect not great, which is unfortunate. However, let's look at this in the core sense. It is not as bad as it might seem, but at the same time, that's not to say that there's some negatives that don't need to be touched on. So let's go through this. So why have we got this 10 milligram RDA? Well, basically the European Industrial Hemp Association sent in their toxicology reports for CBD Isolate and synthetic CBD, and basically they suggested that people shouldn't have no more than 17.5 milligrams per day. All right, so we'll leave the fact that it's an interesting study for a second and just look at the FSA's part in this. Now, certainly they have had to act on information that was provided freely to a point by the industry, right? You know, this isn't them being a bit funny. And in fact, I could kind of understand, considering the information that was stuck in front of them, how they would come to a 10 milligram RDA. It just kind of makes sense in my head. Yeah, if you thought I was going to say something naff about the FSA in this video, unfortunately I'm not going to provide those. I'm just not going to do it. However, I will state there is a question of conflicts in the COT and the AC and FP. I mean, there always has through this process, but certainly they have not named all the individuals who took part in the relevant meetings, and what's more, they have identified 4 who indicated that they had conflicts. 2 decided not to be part of conversations, 2 declared conflicts through their employers, but because they weren't directly tied to those conflicts, they were allowed to continue in the conversations. One is of interest. Dr. Alan Bubis, or is it Professor? One of the 2. Mr. Bubis, you know, he is basically the chairman of the Centre for Toxicity. He declared an interest, and someone decided that that interest had, you know, minimal issues. But who was the person? I'd like to know that. You know, if you're the chairman and you've declared an interest, who then decides whether that interest is relevant or not? And certainly the other professor, that was a Professor Cochrane, basically in 2020, in the COT meetings that decided that we were following 16 lab reports from GW Pharmaceuticals, she indicated that her employer was looking at using CBD as an ingredient. Apparently, because she was not tied to that, that meant that there was no issue. Equally, there was also another Dr. Thatcher, who in 2020 declared that her employer was looking at using CBD in products. Now, I just state that she works for Mondelez, so certainly I suspect that even Mondelez, considering their wide range of products, have decided not to look at CBD products, or maybe not. I also noticed that, of course, Dr. Kuhn, or Professor Kuhn, is still named as a member of the COT. And of course he's tied to Reading University, and whilst there isn't any ties between Jazz Pharmaceuticals or GW at this time, shall we say, they do still have a series of academics there who have worked actively on CBD, and certainly they have patents still working with GW. Which they're named in. So I think, you know, conflicts, they don't have to be current. Or certainly, you know, if there is a recent indicator of some kind of conflict, then maybe they need to be kind of, I don't know, I'm a big fan of transparency in this industry, and certainly we are talking two panels that are populated by academics, and a lot of those academics work for universities who have conducted or engaged in R&D on behalf of GW. That leads to a relationship, and of course GW lab reports, you know, I feel that if you're an academic in that kind of angle, then you're tied to those lab reports, and then maybe there just needs to be someone who isn't. I know that's hard because a lot of universities have tied up with GW, but then, you know, that's unfortunate. But anyway, I digress. Other than that, the FSA's response kind of makes sense, but there has been no mention of isolates, right? Now this is a bit of an industry issue as well, because I've noticed people making comments on this, and I've done a little bit of research. I've had a little look at the reports that I can find. I'm not talking industry reports. I'm talking about you know, publications that are more focused towards the public, right? Because, you know, consumer. Not one of them differentiates between CBD isolate or you know, full or broad spectrum, and in fact the FSA don't either. Now we know that this has come from IA's toxicology reports, and people are saying, yeah, but it's for isolates. The problem here, right, I think is sorry, is historic, and that is basically in 2020 we were told that 16 lab reports literally apply across the board, right? Didn't matter that they were for isolates, they represented guidance or you know, tools to create guidance that, you know, led to novel food requirements, and of course the 70 milligram a day RDA back then, you know. And then of course we've got that Article 4 that may or may not have Epidiolex/Epidiolex under a redacted box. You know, that in itself as well is isolate in MCT oil, but novel foods applies on those documents, you know, across the board. It doesn't matter if it's in MCT oil or whatever oil, you know, it's a novel food if it's contained in a CBD extract of sorts. So we have to consider this, right? Now, also we need to consider the fact that the FSA say that this isn't solid and it subject to change. But, right, I don't think there's going to be a distinction. Doesn't matter. It's just across the board. We can say, like, it came from isolate studies, and yeah, I believe that it should be put out, but equally I also believe that the FSA aren't really going to bother with that, because at the end of the day, that's just bamboozling the consumer with science, isn't it? So why not just go sensible and say, right, that's what we've got, we'll just stick CBD there and that's it. Like, I'll tell you what, the Telegraph is the only one who actually seems to reflect that point, right? They don't mention isolate, but they do say pure form CBD. But the problem there is that me and you might know what that is, right? But the general consumer might not realize that there's a distinction, and that actually refers potentially to isolate as opposed to full plant or full spectrum, broad spectrum extracts. So it's nice that the Telegraph picked it up, but no one else seems to have, not in that domain. I'll tell you what as well, they also indicated the lab reports that it came from, saying that they had a top ADI of 17. Well, if they put 0.5 there, then we would have absolute confirmation. But essentially, yes, this has come from Aya, and that's the spiel. Is it unfortunate that isolate isn't being distinguished from full spectrum? Yes, it certainly is unfortunate. Is it unfortunate that we've had as much press as this that doesn't distinguish with that? But equally, this is something that we don't have to worry about and change our labels. Yes, that is very unfortunate, and certainly when we have a look at the reporting, as I have through the BBC, yeah, you have your thoughts, but they may or may not be a government mouthpiece, so they were certainly one place to check. The Metro, the Metropolitan, the Cosmopolitan, yes. Apparently they covered this yesterday as well. So that is the state of play. Although, I'll tell you what, Cosmopolitan, I'm looking at you now, and your article, you should really not be mentioning that CBD products are helping with chronic pain, anxiety, inflammation, and insomnia. That's medical products, not CBD food supplemental products. Like, good job you're hold on, are you labeling any companies? Nope. Okay then, right, yeah, say what you want, don't care. But anyway, so the industry response, of course, from all of this kind of craziness has been mixed. Now, we have had a dose of realism from a few people, and equally we've had a level of I don't know, skepticism. I've noticed that the ACI, they put out a statement yesterday saying that they will basically take it under advisement, and that ultimately they will review the evidence to determine what their response will be. I used to work for a trade association. I tell you, sometimes you just need to read between the lines, and what I'm reading between the lines is, say what now? If you know what I mean. And rightfully so. It's fair play for them for saying something. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not something that we should worry about, but it's something that we should worry about, like, because the consumer knows about it, but it's not going to be enforced. But it's something that's there, right? And it's highly possible that in some point further information is adjudicated to a point where they will have something to balance, right? And whether that 10 milligram RDA goes up or down, we don't know. But what we could assume from that point is that then the FSA are comfortable to start enforcing something. And certainly if that's removing 1 or 3 products from the public list there because now they've reinforced something with the public, that's something to consider. You know, far be it for me to be a doom and gloomist. I am trying to be realist in this and give a balanced breakdown. And of course, you know, there's being balanced and then there's being realistic as we go on our industry journey. I'm just going to touch on one thing. Yeah, Professor Robin May. He seems to have confused. I don't know, sometimes, like, you know, me and my wife will have a discussion and she'll be like, it's like, and I'll be like, that's not a great analogy. You know, and certainly when you're comparing CBD products to alcoholic products, I don't think that is, I mean, I don't want to say it inappropriate, because, you know, it's not balanced, basically. Right, because I'll tell you what, if you go onto the CBD list or the cannabis sativa list for adverse reactions, right, that's to medicines and vaccines by all accounts, although they do list a few CBD products, right? But we are talking reactions certainly to a lot of products, or some products in a lot of cases, that are more refined than our food supplemental industry products are. And what is noticeable is that actually there is a very, very low, I believe around about 2.5% of cases of hyperbiliary issues. To my understanding, that is in the liver areas. Like, you know, there's far more cases of, I mean, you know, bizarre cases out there that kind of add to the numbers than there are when it comes to liver issues. Like, you know, and this is the issue, right? The consumer is being told information that came from rat studies, but I don't have whiskers and I can't twitch my nose, right? It's not truly reflective. And certainly I think the FSA, you know, they understand that, which I believe is why they're waiting for other studies to be processed for them to adjudicate on. But the consumer won't see that. You know, all they'll see is liver and thyroid issues. And that ultimately is the big issue, right, in this, right? The FSA, right, has not helped the industry, right? And in fact, I don't think they've helped the consumer, because the consumer will see right through that anyway, because the consumer is far more educated than the FSA, I think, will believe. But ultimately, yeah, it's damaging. And that's the big negative. Is it permanent? Depends on the FSA's next lab reports to adjudicate on, and from my understanding, certainly from an ACI webinar I was on not so long ago, most, if not all, lab reports were coming back reflecting a lot closer to 70 milligram than to 10. And in fact, IA's application and tox report were indicated as an anomaly, shall we say. Unfortunately, that anomaly has had an impact, but it's an impact, and yeah, it might scare some consumers. You might get some consumers ask why your products are not reflecting guidance, because we all know that we do have some of those consumers in this industry. But ultimately, don't change your products. Wait until the next update. And on that, before I shoot off, you guys need to check out the Canna Consultants breakdown of this. Now, they are a little bit more focused, less wordy than me, obviously, and definitely they have more communication with the FSA than I do. You know, certainly well, not to the extent that, you know, but yes, do have a look on there, because this may well be the prelude to some products being validated very soon. That has been indicated by the FSA in their documents for their board meetings, but then that rests on the potential of getting controlled cannabinoid guidance from the Home Office. Now, you guys need to consider ACMD guidance. Are we going to get it? Not certain. ACI counter guidance, less than half of the 50 micrograms per serving. Don't know. Right, but consider this: if we are getting guidance soon, right, it could highly be reflective of that 10 milligram RDA, right? And if that is the case, we are going to have really, really low controlled cannabinoid numbers to work by. And the thing is, it's likely that we will have 12 to work by as well, right? So certainly bear that in mind. And with that, I think it's probably time for a word from my sponsor. So we've got adjusted RDA figures, but they're not compulsory yet, or defining. But it's that word that we need to be wary of, yet, because as more lab reports come in, then there will be more of a need to set a sensible level, which will be ultimately then enforced. Fingers crossed it won't be 10 milligrams, but certainly it won't be 70. This is where I think I need to introduce you guys to Phytovista, because they've been about in the industry since I joined it, and I've known them, I've watched them do what they do, and what they do is a dedicated service to the hemp and CBD industry for testing. Now you might think, why do I need to change my tester when it only comes to CBD? Well, very soon we are going to have controlled cannabinoid levels that are dropped onto the industry, which will have an impact on all of our products, mainly because we won't need to test for 2, but we will probably need to test for 12 cannabinoids. That means you need to find a dedicated lab who not only can verify the presence or the absence of those cannabinoids, but also can test within a resolution that will be acceptable by the authorities. Now, you need to consider this, because ultimately we're talking the potential of 50 milligrams of controlled cannabinoids per serving. However, that's not necessarily what we will get. That's from the ACMD after all. And of course the ACI themselves suggested a number that was less than half of that. What we have to really consider is that whatever that total is, it will reflect on the RDA for the CBD at the time. So if we get an announcement tomorrow, it's highly likely that the controlled cannabinoid levels required for our products will be in line with those 10 milligram RDA for CBD products. This is why I believe Phytovista are one of the places to go to, just to ensure that your products are tickety-boo in regards to controlled cannabinoids as well as CBD content. Now, it's not just that they can help you with. Of course, they do authenticity tests. Now, this is quite important because there are a few rumbles in the industry at the moment that some products aren't necessarily as they are described on the label. Certainly, there is the potential for isolate to have been used in some cases where a product in itself is broad or full spectrum as described on the label. So if you're a business or you're a consumer and you're concerned or uncertain about the products that you are getting, certainly Phytovista can help you there. Now, they can also help you with stability testing as well to ensure that any new product that you're planning to bring to market lasts the time that you are hoping, or possibly more, who knows. And of course they do their bread and butter as well when it comes to the cannabinoid tests. So these guys really are worth checking out. Now, what you need to know is actually, if you've got a good price for your current labs, we'll take that price to Phyto Vista and they'll match it. And they'll do that for every single test that is available to the industry. That's worthwhile getting in contact with them for. Certainly then you can see what they do, how they do, and maybe you might want to run a sample past them, see what happens. And if you're happy with the service, happy days. Of course, if you do go and say hello, feel free to say that the Hemp Hound Agency sent you. And of course, if you're uncertain of how to find them, then you can click on the link below, which is on the screen as well. And certainly you can also go to the Hemp Hound directory, where you will find them listed on the alternative service providers page. Okay, now we're back. I just want to touch on two bits, right? And it's been talked about, you know, the differentiation between full spectrum and broad spectrum, right? And I just want to touch on that. Now, we've already seen that lab reports for Isolate and an Article 4 for Isolate and MCT is basically running the show, right? So here's my question. Would we realistically be looking at an alternative RDA for full spectrum products against those of Isolate? It's a fair question to throw out because, you know, we've been jumping through this assuming that that would be the case, but I'm actually starting to wonder if toxicology reports for full spectrum are just to ensure that there's no craziness occurring as a result of the extra cannabinoids or compounds or whatever, as opposed to Isolate. And I wonder if ultimately any RDA given from the FSA is going to be across the board, right? So Isolate RDA, but tox reports from full spectrum, just to make sure that they're tickety-boo. Now, I don't want to stick my neck out on the line, but we have a history, right? And that's reflective on the lab reports and the Article 4, and it's reflective of the FSA statement, which only really distinguishes by the fact that Isolate and other CBD extract products have not been authorized, right? It doesn't state that the reason that we've got that 10 milligram RDA in fact is as a result of a toxicology report that focused on CBD isolate and synthetic CBD. So I don't know where to go from there, but I think it's something you guys need to think about, because I like to be optimistic, but in this sense I'd rather be considering the worst case scenario in a situation like that before if I get that, okay, I can live with that, but if I get that, then that's fantastic. And obviously that's RDA for synthetic there or isolate based products, and that or wherever that would be for full or broad spectrum products. Are we going to get that though? That's the thing. That's the question I want to say yes to. But at the end of the day, if it's a no, then we need to kind of consider that as an industry as a possibility moving on the basis that it's already been shown that there is no differentiation in that way. So yes, I believe there is the potential for toxicology reports for full and broad spectrum products, just to ensure that there is no extra kind of level of adverse reaction that is not present in CBD isolate, but ultimately what comes from the lower will be the dominant figure. Now, here's the second thing. I've seen a lot of people stating, which is kind of something that's obvious, but at the same it isn't. Like, you know, not all CBD is the same. Now, I saw that comment more kind of catchingly from someone who uses an isolate in their products, right? And it was like, hold on. When you get into that level, then yeah, whatever your less than 2% impurities is will distinguish the difference of your product, because other than that, if it's refined single molecule cannabinoids, actually they're a lot closer together than they, you know, than is being suggested. Full and broad spectrum, yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, certainly in that respect, where there's a little bit more left in from the plants, then yeah, they're not all the same. But when you get to, you know, not all CBD is the same, well, all CBD is the same. And certainly when you get to isolate, then the extract is not far off the mark. So here's the question, right? When the FSA adjudicate the next isolate-based lab report and compare, what are they going to do? Are they going to introduce an average, which would seem sensible to me? And then, of course, like as other lab reports are adjudicated, that average is maintained, might go up because all of the lab reports apparently are a little bit more 100 milligram focused, or 70 milligram focused than they are 17.5, shall we say. So, you know, there is that potential on there for that to creep up. But now here is the hard part of that question. If that's not the case, then does that mean that every person's lab report or associated lab report will be reflective on their products? Now, I say this because, you know, this is an advisory kind of level of guidance for the consumer, but it won't be for that long. Certainly as more products get validated or authorized, sorry, then there is going to be a point where the FSA are confident enough to say, right, this is your lot, now you're going to have to act. I mean, that's going to be a tricky scenario because we're still in the kind of you can't alter your product kind of angle, but certainly the FSA can't just get people through the process and then like say, right, yeah, okay, now you're gonna have to chop that, that's okay, chop that. Like I don't know, and my fear there is obviously with the IA members. I mean, you know, let's scoot past the fact that actually the lab report focuses on 10% CBD isolate in a hemp seed oil. But the thing is, easily over half of the companies or the products associated with that data do not fit that dynamic. But what's more is, if the FSA decides that that's your lab report for your products and that's your lab report for your products, well, that leaves a large section of the industry in a pickle. It's something to consider. We are in the realms of uncertainty here, and you know, you'd like to think in some areas that common sense will prevail. You know, and I am hoping that basically the FSA, like, at some point technically disregard IA's toxicology, but not the products associated with it. But they might not. And if that's the case, then we'll have companies with products that have a higher RDA than other companies' products. There'd be a pulling apart, right? Which then creates a whole level of craziness when it comes to like, oh, this product is allowed at that, but that product's allowed at this. So in a sense, we can assume that that would just be too problematic for the FSA, and ultimately that they would go for an average. And if that's the case, that's good. But then, will they do that with everything else? Will they, say, include full spectrum from there? No, because that starts getting problematic again, because, you know, different products. So then, that goes back to the original question, right? Are we going to have a level for isolate and a level for full or broad spectrum? I think the answer is evident by the FSA's announcement, and that ultimately one RDA will rule them all, and in the darkness bind us. Right? I'm sorry, but you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as I said, you know, because at the end of the day, we know that if that is the case, then we're looking at IA's impact, and then that's going to go up. Okay, that actually works. Yeah, will we get close to the 70 again? Who knows, it depends. I have heard of 1 or 2 lab reports that are showing that certainly 100 milligram a day is fine, which is, you know, in stark contrast to IA's. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, obviously, I don't think we're going to have 2 different RDAs, but as other lab reports come in, then I think they effectively are going to save IA's arse. Fair assumption? Who knows? We'll have to keep an eye on that, but certainly I think those are things that need to be considered moving forward, because I suspect we're going to go through a little bit of a fast little jig that will probably result in the early applicants having their products authorised. Then we'll find out exactly what we guys are going to have to jump through in regards to Deloitte's reform, or inspired reform. And from that point, then it's how we go. I mean, of course, there's uncertainty on how the new model of novel foods will pan out, but that's another video, isn't it? Anyway, take care, have a fantastic day, and catch you soon. Ta-da.